Bonjour à tous, bienvenue dans la vidéo exceptionnelle aujourd'hui. Vous allez avoir un pilote d'avion de 4.5 génération, de Rafale, qui interviewe un pilote qui a tout connu, une légende dans l'aéronautique et dans l'aéronautique canadienne. Il a été le premier pilote sélectionné à voler sur CF-18, il a fait du F-16, il a fait du Typhoon, il a fait la guerre, il a commandé au combat, bref, une véritable légende que vous allez découvrir dans quelques secondes. Ça va nous permettre d'échanger et d'essayer de vulgariser ce qu'apporte la 5e génération, ce qu'est pour des utilisateurs. Nous avons tous les deux connu le combat pour défendre notre nation. Ce qui nous intéresse, nous, en tant qu'opérationnels, et forcément, il va y avoir un énorme biais d'utilisateurs. Vous le verrez d'ailleurs dans la conclusion de notre invité du jour, Billie Flynn, légende de l'aviation, qui a travaillé longtemps pendant Lockheed Martin, qui a un petit faible pour le F-35C, la version qui va sur porte-avions. Donc forcément, on est Canadiens tous les deux, il aime bien ce qui va sur porte-avions, ça va bien se passer. On attaque.
So, thank you very much. It's an honor having you on our show. As we discussed earlier, and I've explained to my community, I discovered a new world when I switched from Super-Étendard to Rafale. My understanding is that you're a unique piece of Canadian history because you've been the first one on CF-18s, you flew F-16, you even flew Typhoons, and you know what 5th generation is like. And we almost displayed at the same air show. You displayed the F-35 to France in 2017, and I was asked to study French Navy display on the 2017 Bonjour show, but it got cancelled. So we didn't get the chance to meet. But to get straight into the topic, what is it that you discovered when you switched from 4th generation to the F-35 world? What is it that we do not understand about 5th gen in France?
First of all, merci pour l'invitation ici aujourd'hui, d'avoir la chance de parler, de discuter des avions de chasse. On aime ça. Puis, j'ai aussi la chance d'expliquer stealth, puis 5e génération des avions de chasse. We're talking generational differences. And your example of Super-Étendard to Rafale was the same leap when in Canada, we went from an F-104, an F-101, and an F-5 to a 4th generation fighter of the CF-18. They're so dramatically different. They aren't incremental improvements to what we know. They're complete changes. And so you experienced that. And I began, as you said, my life as the first young pilot picked directly out of pilot training to join in the CF-18, that 4th generation. And now we talk 5th gen. And 5th gen has a lot of characteristics. It is universally known to have two main ones, and that is stealth and sensor fusion. Stealth is not invisibility. It is not Harry Potter and the Cloak of Invisibility, like from the books and the movies that we all loved. It's not that, but it is nearly impossible to detect. And I'll go into stealth in a second. And the second element of that is sensor fusion. That is taking all the information from all the sensors we have, from our electro-optical sensors, clearly from our radar, from the electronic warning systems that we have on board, from every other sensor we have, putting it all together and presenting to the pilot a single collated presentation, a God's eye view of the world around, where in essence, we don't care the source of the information. We don't care what sensor is used. We just care that there's a single presentation for us to understand. The combination is, one, you can't be seen until you're so close that you would have dominated against your adversary. So you are essentially not visible in any spectrum. Okay, so you can't be seen, but with sensor fusion, we've taken all the many displays, put them into one, and you see everything that exists. And in the case of F-35, which I flew as a test pilot for 10 years, everything, 360 degrees around, for hundreds of kilometers. So it's not just in front of you when a radar would look in a 45-degree or 60-degree angle out 100 kilometers or 200 kilometers, maybe. Everything in the air, on the ground, on the sea, everything in the electronic spectrum, and everything that's emitting beside you, behind you. And so now you can't be seen, but you see everything. And it is a sense of dominance, omnipotence that is not present in any previous generation of airplanes. Our airplanes got better over time. Rafale, Eurofighter Typhoon, Gripen, F-16, F-15, F-18, all immensely maneuverable, immensely capable, as fast as you needed to go. And yet we always knew the adversary could see us. When you can't be seen in the distances that we talk about, now you are offensive because you know they can't see you. You don't have to worry about other people sneaking up on you. And when you see everything, especially at the enormous distances away, now you're planning strategically on how to attack. And you can decide whether you have to attack or you just avoid the adversary to get to your target and do your mission and leave every time without being seen. And we'll talk about F-35, which is the airplane everybody loves to hate. But remember that what we learned in fifth gen comes from the F-22. 189 of them produced for the United States Air Force that has dominated aerial warfare for now 30 years. And so while we can debate the value of what fifth generation is or not, and is it better than a 4.5 generation Rafale, Eurofighter Typhoon, F-15EX, F-16 Block 60, which I was a part of, Gripen E, pick them. Those incremental improvements, which are really impressive, is that what fifth generation is? And F-22 set the standard because it has dominated for 30 years. The B-2 bomber, invisible still today. B-21 coming as a sixth generation fighter. F-35, its exchange ratios in exercises like Red Flag, but also in real world operations like Iran by the Israeli Defense Force is just incomprehensible for us, you and I, who grew up as fourth generation pilots. Stealth, sensor fusion, survivability, lethality, effectiveness on an order of magnitude more than we ever knew before.
So what I truly understand from your take is, so sensor fusion. The Rafale has great sensor fusions. Difference, we don't have 360. Yet I've been able to use some tactics where we detect heat, things like that. What I really learned from our conversation right now is the avoid part. I was a division leader, never struck my mind to try to avoid a threat because they're going to come at me at some point. So this avoidance, I'll take your X4 generation, but it wasn't part of our culture to try to avoid something. Because with a Super E, I would detect like 15 miles, 20 miles, it's going to be factor no matter what. So now you're telling us, yes, stealth enables you to not pick a fight and to go towards your target. Yeah. Okay.
Because all of us since, oh, by the way, World War I and the Red Baron and all those early fighter pilots, it was always attrition warfare. It was us against them. And it was who detected who first, right? Whoever sees first wins. Who's got the longest missiles? How to get the most kinematic energy from our missiles, from our airplanes, fly high, fast, loft missiles so they would go further and hit our enemy before us. And the evolution of that. It's always attrition warfare. It's really their numbers against our numbers. Who's the best pilots? Who's the best training? Who has the best armament? And all of a sudden you change that dimension and you say, I don't have to pick a fight. I don't have to go engage the fighters that are out looking for me. I can go around them because they can't see me. And they will continue and orbit and look around, but we won't be there. I can avoid surface to air threats, both the emitters that are looking for me and obviously the missiles themselves. I can just skirt around them, go around them and onward. When we So let's get into stealth just for a bit. We know about stealth really from the SR-71 Blackbird way back at when, and that famous Mach 3 spy plane, and in the angles of its design. Mostly though, we come to the F-117 stealth fighter, that black, hard, faceted design that we all saw in Gulf War I, which flew like an A-7. It was not maneuverable at all. It was just a bomber. It completely relied on the radar cross-section and that early design. But we've learned over time, and the evolution from F-117 to F-22, thrust vectoring, amazing maneuverability, insane power, super cruise, the evolution of flight control logic, we learned that building an airplane stealth with a stealth characteristics could still be maneuverable and super fast. And so we also learned not just to control the radar cross-section and the reflection of the radar energy, but all our emissions, our signature in the electromagnetic spectrum, in the infrared spectrum, in the radar cross-section element of that, right? So an F-22 doesn't race around super cruise at Mach 1.5 all the time because the front surface of the airplane would be hot, which makes it an infrared target to anybody that has an infrared sensor. People don't talk on the radios, and they don't use their radars unless they have to. And they talk across to each other in data links that are stealthy and don't just broadcast to everything like a Link 16 network does. And so they make themselves invisible, not just in the radar spectrum, but also electromagnetic and infrared. It is signature management, so that I'm just trying not to get seen. And that's a much different way than, look, the F-15 Eagle, which had the best radar of all time, and would just go out there with a big radar and look for everybody with all that radar energy. It's not attrition warfare anymore.
So that means you're going to try to plan on using the weather or to try to mitigate your infrared signature as well. That's part of all those tactics to make sure nobody can detect you and just try to sneak in, do your mission, and come back. I mean, we're not in the fighter pilot mindset we grew in, where we take off, we have to fight. Now it's you take off, you have to achieve the mission, and if need be, you're gonna kill the enemy. But it's like it's a culture shift almost. Is that correct?
It is. And remember, so you'll mention it in my background, I commanded the Canadian forces, the CF-18 wing that fought in Operation Allied Force, the NATO operation in the spring of 1999, attacking Kosovo and Serbia to stop the genocide. And in that case, what we did as NATO is we busted through a wall. We created a highway, an auto route, where we went right at the enemy. We used our electronic warfare capabilities. We used F-15s in the front to sweep for air to air. And we basically opened up from the defenses and paralyzed the defenses so that all of us, 60 to 80 airplanes, could attack in this highway that we created that was protected by our electronic warfare capabilities and our harm shooters to shoot anybody that dared shoot at us. And then we would attack our targets, and then we would exit in another highway on the way out and egress. So we purposely went at the enemy and took out all his resources. Well, that's entirely different than what you and I are now talking about, which is I would just avoid all that. I don't need the enemy. I don't want the enemy to know where I am. I want them to have no idea when I'm coming. And I'm certainly not going to fly the same route every single time. Like, by the way, the F-117 did when it was shot down, same operation, because they came in the same way every day. I want to avoid all that and not make my life more difficult. And I know they can't see me. And I know from their radar energy and my signature how much of me is exposed, so that I can make my profile fit to make me the most survivable. So that's when we talk about stealth. That's where this all comes from. And we could say that the world doesn't, that you can detect stealth because you have whatever band radar now. It isn't just the radar cross-section, as I'm trying to explain. And we've learned so much from that. And we can talk about F-35 and whether people think it's worth or not. But F-22 is the lesson that we've all drawn from, to believe in what a stealth fighter is capable of and what different warfare we now are embarking on.
So an important topic, what I get from your answers and your explanation is that you're not going to fly around with your radar on like most 4.5 aircraft. I mean, it's changing. It has been changing a bit in the last 10 years, but so radar it's going to be a tactical decision to turn it on or off. But mostly, if you want to be undetected, you're going to try to sneak in and maintain situational awareness in a different way. And my next question is stealth against VLO, or let's say Sukhoi 57, G-35, G-20. Listening to you, I'm a naval officer. I was in the Navy, so I'm thinking about the new, when we switched to very silent submarines, and in France, we actually had two submarines with, I think it was the British ones that collided because they couldn't hear each other. The way aerial warfare is going to go when we're going to go maybe F-35, if one day against G-20 or 35, it's going to be very different from 4.5 gen tactics, correct? Because like it's going to be very difficult to catch one another. What's your take on that?
Yeah, and I think if you put a 4-ship of J-35s against a 4-ship of F-35s and came at each other, at what point would you actually detect each other, even if you were at the same altitude? I don't see aerial warfare being like that, because we're going to talk about what future we have now as we add in collaborative combat aircraft, drones, which we'll get into. I don't see that it's going to go that way where it's matched 1-for-1. We have learned, even in 4.5 gen fighters, that we don't have to emit all the time. When we talked to, here's our definition for everyone. When we talked about an AESA radar, active electronically scanned array, right? So I'm sure you've seen it. It essentially, it's a flat plate, and it has about 1,000 little metal emitters that are on there. I actually counted them on the face of a jet once. They opened the front, and I took the time to count the rows and count the columns. About 1,000.
I never did on a Rafale.
Okay, so
didn't even cross my mind. I'm not a
well,
test
you don't
pilot.
want to waste your time. Right?
I'm not a test pilot.
So it's these little emitters, and we talk about an AESA radar, but it's an array, active electronically scanned array. Yes, it has a radar function. It has a radar function because it's way better than old radars that move back and forth like we were all used to. Okay, it does many more things than just that, but it's an array. It's an electronic warfare array. Active to be able to send beams to jam, but passive to be able to sense. And when we start thinking about an array in my airplane, not a radar, which has to transmit, then I can decide when I need to transmit to detect an enemy, to track him, target him, shoot at him, that particular task. Or do I just want to listen because I know he's emitting, because I know he's talking on his radar, because I know his radar's transmitting, because I know his electronic warfare system's out there transmitting, and he's just a big, huge lighthouse, like on the coast, with a big signal that everyone can see. And so we've learned over time to manage how we use our transmission functions, and it is an array. So there's an effectiveness of just listening as we fly along. And you talked about another thing just briefly. Remember, even in our 4.5 gen fighters, we know enough now, we don't have to transmit all the time. We share data link information that we never had before. So we have tremendous situational awareness in a 4-ship because we're all sharing what we all see. And we don't just have to build situational awareness with our single airplane with your radar looking out, picking a picture that you can. We're sharing between formation partners. And so our situational awareness is way better and way different in the evolution of tactics. All of that says, I don't have to be transmitting all the time and be a big lighthouse out there.
Another question I have for you is directly into those tactics. A question that crossed my mind is, if your aircraft stealth is hard to detect for a regular fighter plane radar, what about the missiles that might come at you? Let's say you get trapped, or it's a crisis situation, or it's an enemy aircraft that is already, because you're just in an ambush scenario close to you, is going to shoot, let's say, not an heat-seeking radar, an electromagnetic missile. What the chances? I mean, don't go into secret stuff, of course, but how come most 4.5 gen aircraft are equipped with an L-56?
Tow decoys,
yeah,
we have
tow
chaff
decoys, yeah.
and we have electronic warfare, and we have the same thing in an F-22, and we have the same thing in an F-35.
You're going to have tow decoy as well in F-35s? Yes, you have all that stuff. Okay. So
you're still going to have to assume that you're going to have to fight your way out of a fight, and we can discuss how an F-22 gets into a air combat close within visual range, and someone can tell you all the probabilities of why it would never happen, but in fact,
it can.
You never know why it could. And the same conversation with an F-35 or an F-47 as it's being developed, or F-gas or GCAP, the 6th gen fighters. All along, we still have to assume we have to fight our way out of things, which is why they still have to be maneuverable, why there's thrust vectoring or not, why they have to have defensive capabilities of chaff and flare, which is pretty close in, why all those systems still have to be on board. Nobody believes that you're a platform that can never be seen and you'll just walk through it all invisible, undetectable. That's not realistic.
Okay, so you take into account the fact that the missile is going to be able to see you, and you have to have all the stuff
as we did before.
Yeah, as you did before. Okay, makes sense. Quick question on the infrared part, just to make sure, because I know it's a big topic in France, because we have a very good optique secteur frontal in France. We have a very good system in front. Again, in front. I mean, not 360 degrees, but let's say you have a 35 that go full afterburner. I mean, I'm pretty sure you must have low situation awareness to do that in front of a Rafale, but let's say you detect the heat. What is the take of the F-35 pilot? So the objective is to basically never put yourself in a position where you could be detected even by infrared systems. So you avoid if you want to, or your ability is to be able to take a shot before that, making sure the Rafale is not or 4.5 aircraft is not a threat anymore. Because what about those dangerous spots? So what I mean is being detected by infrared, and Micaillère is a great missile that can go very far on infrared.
And oh, by the way, so do the Soviets, and the Chinese have amazing missile technology. And if I'm racing around in full afterburner in a fighter that has 43,000 pounds of thrust, I am a Roman candle waiting for everyone.
You're going to be reassigned pretty fast, I guess. Yeah.
I've just asked the world to come look at me and shoot me. And why don't I race around at 1.5 Mach or in an F-22 at 2.0, whatever it does, 2.0 something Mach, 2+ Mach? Because I'm going to have front edges. I'm going to be a hot target out there for everyone in every infrared system to see me. And we understand that infrared, the limitation of infrared is range. It's not detection, right? There's an object in the sky that is super, super hot. I can see that. How do I detect? How do I track it? Because I have to solve a range problem, which I can't really solve just with an infrared detection. Then I have to target it, and then I have to shoot at it. There's lots of problems I have to solve. Just because I see it doesn't mean I can kill it. But our job is to understand what our signature is, manage it by how we manage our engine, the profile that we fly, so that we don't expose ourselves unnecessarily. And it's back to what I said earlier about signature management. And maybe an F-22 doesn't have to do that because they know they can outrun everybody and they can run everyone down and shoot everybody. But the rest of the world does. I have no idea what a B-21 can do, but I'm certain that they must think of that also in considerations.
Are you fully aligned? If to sum up a bit the change, the disruptions that came with 5th gen. It's like explaining to viewers to have a look at the hunt for the Red October, to understand how stealth work a bit and how it has changed the battlefield. Back in the days, everybody would be able to hear everyone. And now you have this ability, if you wish to be very discreet. And at some point, I don't know if you recall the movie, but you have the US submarine commanders that goes full backwards. So he's going to make some noise and he's going to be detected. It's like a choice, stuff like that.
All back full.
Say again?
I said all back full.
Back full, aye, sir. Engines back full.
Captain, we're cavitating. You can hear us.
But understanding that stealth is something you have to try to maintain, that enables you tactics that otherwise are not possible. And the main tactic being avoidance.
Yeah, there's no debate anymore by defense experts about the value of a VLO, very low observable platform, right? There's no debate. we talk and people are defensive about their products, Eurofighter, Rafale, Gripen, because those aircraft designed in the 1980s, were part of the Euro-canarded design mentality, right? It was a delta wing and the canards enabled agility. So as you mentioned, I flew Typhoon in the beginning of its life as a German test pilot in that consortium. But I was also at Le Bourget. The first time I flew there was the CF-18. I was not even 30 years old. In 1987, I displayed the CF-18 and
I was one. Oh.
Yeah? Yeah, okay. Now you're embarrassing me. So
it's to show your expertise.
Rafale prototype was there. Oh, by the way, Mirage 2000, Mirage 4000 flew, but also the EAP, the Experimental European Aircraft Program. It's the predecessor to Typhoon. And they were both there. And I sat in the Rafale prototype, which was amazing as a young fighter pilot because it was so cosmic in the time. It was the technology of canards to enable what a delta wing could bring, right? The whole design platform. No one had thought about stealth. It was not part of the philosophy in the time. It was about maneuverability and what to extract the most from what was understood to be the best wing design then. And canards do different things in Rafale than they do in Eurofighter, than they do in Gripen. But that's the whole design. And then we step into what really became F-22, changed it all, that competition, why F-23, why F-22, stealth platforms, super cruise, and then inside the cockpit, sensor fusion. And that changed it all. But the designs of Euro canards have stayed for 40 years. And so there are people that still hang on and argue against stealth. And the reality is, look at the future design of FCAS, the future design of GCAP, of F-47, and every drone that is being designed today as a collaborative combat aircraft. Everyone has a stealth profile. It isn't like someone's got past this technology, right? The future, move on. We accept now highly maneuverable, supersonic platforms that are very low observable as just one part of what they do.
Second part for 5th gen is also this sensor fusion. What about the ability of F-35? In Europe, most of our neighbors are buying F-35, and we're going to have some sort of mix of fleets, maybe sometime between, and for the next decades with 4.5 gen and F-35. How easy is it to cooperate, to have them work together? And how resilient is the architecture? Because let's say, because we're not the US Air Force, we cannot just, let's say, send 25 F-35 on a mission. We're going to have only a few. It's going to have an impact on the tactics we can use as well. So we're going to have to use 4.5 gen aircraft. Is it easy to have them work together, at least US built ones, or what's your take on that?
Two parts. One, F-35s are interchangeable, not just interoperable. In NATO, we all understand we've perfected it over the many, decades and decades now. We all work together. Portuguese, Spanish, all of us have learned to fly together. Our tactics aren't exactly the same, but we know we can talk on radios, share some data link. We understand roughly how we all work together. And we've gone to war in big packages. Got it. F-35 all along was meant to be interchangeable. So my data link system in a Danish F-35 links to a British F-35, links to a Dutch F-35. And now I'm exchanging not time, place, and position and weapons, which is all really 16. Okay. Now I'm exchanging fused information from my Danish cockpit that's now shared with a Dutch F-35 cockpit back and forth. And I see what they see what I see. And our collective awareness is orders of magnitude more sophisticated and broader. I'm become strategic in what I see, not just tactical close in, interchangeable, different than what I did before. So that's the interchangeability element of F-35. That's why it's so powerful in a NATO ally context. 5th gen and 4th gen-ish platforms, right? Last generation, which are still going to be there. We're still going to have we're going to be taking F-16s into combat. We're going to be taking, somebody who's hauling bombs with us along the way. Not everyone has a 5th gen or 6th gen platform. And I think we've learned already the integration with the Dutch Air Force, especially leading in Europe, about how to work with everyone else. And that does not mean exposing 5th gen in the front of a package of legacy airplanes so that the bad guys know that it must be F-35 in front. But some part of that formation includes platforms that cannot be seen at the same ranges, right? They're not legacy, that do missions like suppression of enemy air defense, which is a mission that F-35 excels at, killing the ground emitters, killing the surface-to-air threat so the legacy fighters can move back and forth. I credit the Dutch with understanding how to do that. I credit the Royal Australian Air Force, which has Super Hornets and Growlers, of how to integrate those platforms. And also the United States Navy has done exceptional work with F-35C, Super Hornets, which is really their primary bomb-dropping airplane, and Growlers, of how to integrate them all together and how to cycle in and how to use the effectiveness of a stealth platform to enable the capabilities of the other airplanes. So we've learned to do not as cut and dry, as simple as we thought, but now I think we've learned over the now decade plus.
I'm not into the TTPs, and I actually never flew against F-35s. I flew against F-18. I mean, all of them, but not F-35. But if I was mission commander, I think it's an awesome beam entry platform against the enemy. Like you just can come in and undetected on the side. I think it's, from a tactical point of view, I'm sure they must have been having a blast working with a type of asset. But from a human factor point of view, in terms of workload, because as you said, you share everything. I know that when I was instructing on the Rafale toward the end, I tried to push the word tumbleweed toward my wingmen. I told them, you're not flying super étendard anymore. It's going to be a complex mission. You're going to be at some point overwhelmed with everything going on. What makes you a great fighter pilot now is to understand you're overwhelmed right now due to your lack of expertise. Tell me, we have a NATO code word, tumbleweed. Let me know, help me guide you, regain situation awareness, because it's going to happen. So if it used to happen on 4.5 gen aircraft with pilots that have been in training for like 6-7 years, what about the F-35? Is it like something that's going to require even better pilots? Like we used to say, you need a Pentium 9 in your brain as a CPU to fly single seat Rafale. Do you need like a Pentium 25 to fly a 35? What is it?
It's completely germane to what I do right now, and it's what I've watched all along. So the cognitive workload in an airplane that sees so much is vastly higher, the workload vastly higher than anything that we've ever done before. Remember that when we built Rafale, when we built Eurofighter, when we built F-18, we were so proud of our display management and how we had made, from the older generation airplanes, things so much easier to understand, the presentations of things. And then we've got better. We have large area displays now where we put it all up in front of the pilot. But now we're talking about an airplane that sees even more than before. And the cognitive workload is a very, very real issue. And so one of my studies over the many years watching a different generation adapt to F-35 is that they had a skill that the legacy pilots did not. And I dissected that and said, look, I don't think this is just because they play better video games. It's not a gamer environment. It is a skill set unique to 5th generation aircraft that will, by the way, apply as we go into CCAs and managing drones with us and 6th gen. The cognitive workload in a 5th generation aircraft is uniquely harder, an order of magnitude more complex to optimize the system. Look, you can fly I can put you in F-35 and you will be King Kong and you will shoot everything out that's out there and they will never see you and you will feel like the world's greatest fighter pilot. But it's in part because you know they can't see you and if you have all the time in the world. You have all day to sort out who's out there and build your situational awareness. When I take away the stealth element of that time factor, you don't have all the time. Look, in the United States Air Force, they train colonels and generals and allow them to fly tactical missions in F-22s and F-35s. It isn't because they are as good as captains and majors on fighter squadrons. It's because they fly a platform that no one can see and they have all the time in the world for a 45-year-old colonel to figure out what's going on as a part of a formation, or a 50-year-old general. They may be good, but they're not that good. They have time. When you take away time, now we have a unique skill set. So I have invested in that, and I am part of a new program called 5GCX.ai, and it's to teach the cognitive skill set that is required in a 5th generation platform. We have always, you're getting to the point, which is we've always invested in the airplane, the platform, our missiles, our sensors, and we've forgotten about the human in the cockpit. I can tell you the difference between a 25-year-old lieutenant who's gone through the F-35 transition and his 40-year-old squadron commander who went to weapons school, who was astonishing in a legacy F-16 CJ seed platform, and yet the 25-year-old is more lethal in an F-35. The 25-year-old has learned this unique skill and has adapted to the airplane to optimize what a platform, 5th generation F-35, F-22, and whatever comes next. Whereas the legacy pilot is holding on to his old skill set and hasn't learned the skill set that he would need to really optimize the platform. I don't believe it's a youth thing. I don't believe it's because someone was a gamer. There are enough cognitive studies that say gamers are not effective in combat missions, just gaming alone. But it is a unique skill set. We've broken it down into competencies. We've measured how the human learns, and we understand now that we can uniquely teach that skill. And all of our training systems have to adapt to the cognitive workload moving forward, right? If you're a battle space commander on a destroyer now with an Aegis weapon system, that's the US weapons system that in American destroyers, you see so much on that airspace out there. That's a massive cognitive workload that you have to get through to decide who's lethal, who's not, who you're targeting, who's not, who you're assigning missiles to. And that's the same in a fighter cockpit. You with a wingman, you spent your whole life telling the wingman what to do. But now that wingman sees as much as you do because you're sharing information, you want that wingman to be empowered. You don't want him to have to ask permission like every wingman has since World War I, by the way. You want him to manage his systems on his own and be part of a formation sharing, not subservient to the hierarchy of you and me as formation leaders, because they have so much information. So unique skill, it can be taught. It needs to be addressed throughout our pilot training programs. Now, as we move forward, it's only going to get more complex in our cockpits with CCA.
Quick question on that. When I started flying Rafale, the French Navy taught me about what they call the cliff effect. Cliff effect being you have a level of efficiencies that stands here. Now I remove the central screen from your aircraft. failure, whatever, never happened. I never had it, but you have to train for it. And now you go from 100% to, let's say, 60%. And that never happened back in the fourth gen day because you don't have a single piece of equipment that creates so much value. We had training. I got the super training, old school training, landing on a boat training with absolutely zero automation. I'm pretty sure like you, I was taught to do closer support, flying around using my knees with a map and just doing that stuff in the cockpit, old school stuff. And my generation, like old school generation, we thought those are skills that you need to pass on the next generation. And the feeling I have is at some point, you're going to have to decide for money and time reasons, what percentage of the time you train your pilots with everything that works, what percentage you train. And my generation was with or without L16. We would do sweeps without L16 just because you have to build your situation awareness without data sharing. And it's a skill that needs to be trained. It's like a muscle. What about the new generation? It is like the mindset. It's going to work. You're going to fight with it or you're not going to fight. That I can understand if you want to pick your fight. If you start fighting in the Pacific, you're not going to be able to pick your fight. And what about the cliff effect from a HR point of view?
Yeah, and it's really important. And I think it gets to overall flying skills, and let's call it airmanship. As I attend fighter conferences all over the world, I listen to many leaders talk about how great simulation is. And I listen to industry marketing people talk about how amazing the simulators are. It's mixed reality. It's virtual reality. It's mixed reality. It's augmented reality. And we don't need to fly as much anymore. And the fundamental reality, I believe, there's some element of old school that is still required. Like you still have to go fly for real, as good as simulators are. You still have to come back to the basics, because when the automation does not work, what are you left with? And we know so many accidents in the civilian world that are a result of over-reliance on automation. Let's pick Air France 447 as the single example we all come back to, and everybody, all your listeners know it. But it's everywhere, by the way, the over-reliance when everything has to work perfect. And when it doesn't, what does that crew or that pilot go to? And if they never learn basics, they have nothing to go to. They have no way out. And old school, right? So you were old school. Watch, map, ground, right? You had a map. We drew maps and lines, and we looked outside with a compass and a stopwatch and figured out how fast we were going. Are we on time or not? And measure that, which just seems so archaic. People would think we are bush pilots now, even they have GPS. I think there has to be that balance to understand that you have to give old school skills because it won't work all the time. And I saw that in combat as a commander leading those mass formations, but also leading my own force-ship when I'd have a wingman that had 1 or 2 failures of his system, and then he wanted to go home because he didn't know the sub levels of the capability where he could have still flown with and been survivable and dropped his bombs, but he didn't have that understanding. He didn't have those basics. So I still believe in things like airmanship that has to be taught, and you have to learn in the air. You have to make the mistakes. You have to scare yourself. I think that has to be there. And the levels of study of the failure of the automation still has to be done. I mean, the next phase for us is AI and trust in AI. And are we going to fly with AI as our wingmen in drones or even in our own airplanes? And at what point do we say we, the human, are still responsible? When it all works, it's astonishing. And I believe we should be early adopters and believe in the capabilities. But if we are so reliant that we do not understand the fallbacks of that, then we're not early adopters. We're just ignorant and we're waiting to get killed. So I think you're 100% on the mark of the basics or that fallback or that extra layer of training. In the end, we still have to pay much more attention to it than we are doing these days.
Okay, great. Last question before we switch to program maturity is you talked about cognitive love, about sensor fusion. from my experience 10 years ago on the Rafale, sometime having different sensors overloads you because you now start having different tracks. And because some tracks are not high quality, coming from an old AWACS, other tracks might be a bit outdated. You start having and that's something maybe our viewers do not fully understand, is when you have sensor fusion, when you have different tracks coming from different sources, you have different timings. And because aircraft fly very fast, you can have several miles of difference between tracks. And now you have one aircraft ahead of you or behind you, and you have 3-4 different tracks. So you have the computer on the Rafales that are going to try to make it smart for you, but you can decide at what level, because it depends on the quality of the source. I think it's very big those days. What about the quality of the data? Does the F-35 do a great job reducing that decision-making process for the pilot? Or do you still have to dig into the data, quality of the data, and make your selection depending on which one you want to prefer? Or do you have like a pilot impact possible on deciding which data source you're going to select? Or is it all done for you by the software and you don't see it?
Well, it's all done for you, but that's the magic of the algorithms of sensor fusion. And the father of sensor fusion in the F-22 and later F-35 was a fellow. I was a technical fellow at Lockheed Martin in my years there. And this gentleman, now deceased, name is Thomas Fry. Tom Fry was the father of fusion. And the complexity of it, as you said, the sensors would see different objects out there, and then depending on the quality of the track, it would sign percentages to tell you why it believed that was a single track out there and not two tracks that were just so close that they seemed as one, or they would look like one, but really there was two. And the fusion would tell you that because it was able to extract through different sensors, different signatures or different emissions to know there were two there. The secret of the evolution of sensor fusion is the ability to manage the complexity of that. But at some point, like you know this, the physics of, if I put two airplanes 30 meters apart, 10 meters apart flying, to ask a radar to find that, to confirm they're actually that close at 100 kilometers away, well, that's just physics, and that would be impossible to do. So there are clearly times when even the best algorithms cannot figure that. And everyone that saw the first Top Gun movies remembers what were they? Were the
MiG-28?
The MiG-28s flying, underneath each other in resolution cell, right? Knowing that the radars couldn't pick them up. That still exists, but we do know this. The sophistication of fusion and the algorithms really does work.
Just maybe a quick note for the audience. You have radar, you have heat-seeking sources, you have your electronic warfare. You can have cameras and you can have pods. We see a lot of F-15s, F-16 flying around with pods. Pod has a unique ability that I'm pretty sure we can share open source, is you see the target. And before turning, an aircraft has to bank. And one of the first signal you can have from an aircraft leaving the face-to-face is you can see it starting to turn. It's going to turn. And that's something most radars can tell you, or other sensors can tell you. So every sensor has plus and minus in terms of the way you're going to use it. So it's a full-time job to optimize all that stuff. Perfect.
Yeah.
In terms of criticism on the F-35, what we hear a lot in Europe is maintenance issues, is all the updates, and we'll get into sovereignty a bit later, but you've been with Lockheed Martin, you've seen all the updates, you've seen all the project. There are a lot of criticism on it. You lived it from the inside. Is it something the press made up? Is it true? Everything could be better. What's your take on it?
Well, so a couple of things. Yes, I was Lockheed Martin test pilot, F-16 and F-35 and auto ground collision avoidance. I did that for 17 years. And I retired more than 5 years ago, moved back to Canada. And I don't get paid by Lockheed Martin on purpose. I don't want the money or any contract to them anymore. But I do speak about F-35 because I watched the evolution of it all, and because I was a 4th gen baby, CF-18, and like you said, F-16, Typhoon in the beginning. And I watched the evolution of 5th gen. So I do understand and believe in that part. Let's be very clear, and I always start from the beginning. F-35 was overpromised and underdelivered from the very beginning. A world of promises of what it was going to do, wildly failed for a long time, immensely difficult to mature the technologies, a 10-year test development program, and till eventually that formal part was done. And I, for most of my test career, flew at the Naval Air Station at Patuxent River, Maryland, east of Washington, D.C., focused on the F-35B and C. That's what I really tested most of. My name was on a 3rd B airplane in those days. And then in the end, yes, I have equal time F-35A, B, and C. But most of my time is B and C testing.
How many time do you have on the platform? How many hours do you have on the platform?
I don't have 1,000, but I have hundreds and hundreds, hundreds and hundreds in each of them. I love the C model most. It's got the big wing, 20,000 pounds of gas. It is the wing that should have been on the airplane. It is just astonishing. And when you lower the landing gear to come land, it is like flying a Zeppelin. It barely moves through the sky. It lands so slow. It is just a magnificent airplane to fly. Anyway, my tangent there. C model is my favorite of all time. But hundreds of hours all through development. Okay, overpromised, underdelivered, immensely difficult to mature, to get the helmet to work, to make sure the flight controls work the way they wanted, to get fusion to work the way we expected, ultimately produced an airplane that is, well, dominant in the air. And then it was time to build them. But what was not recognized by the company, and I'm one of the biggest critics, is that Block 4, which was the first major upgrade to the platform in what would have been way more than 10 years, Block 4 was going to be technically immensely difficult. It was going to have a refresh of the hardware called TR3, Tech Refresh 3, new processors, okay, faster processors, and then all the software wish lists that every customer wanted was going to be started to add in Block 4. Turns out that TR3 was very hard, lots of hardware problems. And then Block 4 becomes hard because now you have to implement everything. A new radar, a new electro-optical system, many more capabilities throughout the platform. Late, over budget. I'll blame Lockheed Martin for the manning of that and not understanding that the amazing talent that developed the aircraft from the very beginning should have been kept on the salary and not retired, so that those really smart developers and testers, test pilots, test engineers, would have been there to make Block 4 happen. But it is happening. And the record of F-35 in combat is astonishing. I'm not a fan of war. Nobody wins, but it's hard to ignore what the Israeli Defense Force has done in the most heavily defended, lethal place in the world, downtown Tehran. Undetected, astonishing, paralyzing the defenses there early, and then leading a massive raid after that. Wow, incomprehensible. And what it can do in combat is what everybody promised. And Block 4, when it comes, will be it. It's a monster though, right? It's 3,500 aircraft. It's a franchise program. For the first time in history, the media and the politicians were allowed access to the development of the program all along. The last program in history that finished on time, on budget, was Kelly Johnson and the Lockheed Skunk Works and the U-2 spy plane in 1957, where he finished early and he returned money to the government. And that is the last time ever. Not Rafale, not Gripen, not F-16, not F-18, not F-15, and certainly not Typhoon, not F-22, none of them. But we never looked at them, and we never cared, and we never had insight into the program. in F-35, look, we had instant messaging. It was BlackBerry in the beginning, but pretty soon in iPhones. And congressional staffers from Washington, D.C. would be sending messages to Washington, D.C. as soon as we landed from test missions about how things were going. And so the public and the press in a franchise program that was going to be at least $1 trillion saw everything from the beginning, and the world paid attention. Had they been around for Rafale or Eurofighter or F-18, they would have screamed just as loud, but they didn't. So you have public scrutiny, you have an immensely expensive program. It is the single fighter development program for all the nations that have bet everything on this product, and it deserved the scrutiny that it got. Ultimately, holy Moses, what it does in combat, what it does in real world operations, what it does for every Air Force and every fighter pilot that flies it will testify just how lethal and survivable and effective it is, but it still gets lots of hate. The lineup for F-35 haters is very, very long.
Because we're in the F-35 haters topic, the big topics that has been around European press in the past month have been around the kill switch concept. Do you have a take, something you can share about the way we picture it? If I want to sum up what's circulating in the news is, from one side, some people say basically there is like a switch. We've heard politicians say that. On the other side, some say you cannot prepare a mission without using computers and softwares from the US. And then there is a last part that says, because of the maintenance and all the stuff, if the US don't want you to use it within a month, 2 months max, due to the maintenance and all that stuff, you won't be able to use the aircraft anymore. That's basically the three groups we hear.
Never was a kill switch. Donald Trump doesn't have a button to stop F-35s for flying. It never happened. It became the great urban myth. It does not exist, and everyone of authority and everyone's Air Force has said that. So there's no kill switch. Donald Trump can't stop you from flying. Source code. For the first time in history, non-American country allies could have the same level of capability as the American forces had. So when the NATO nations bought the F-16, the EPAF nations, European partner air forces, Denmark, Norway, Netherlands, Belgium, they had F-16s, but they were not the same F-16s as the United States Air Force flew. Canada and Australia bought F-18s at the very beginning of the program, and the CF-18 and the Australian F-18 were not the same as the United States Navy and Marine Corps had, okay? You never had exactly the same. But the promise with F-35 partners was everybody gets the same capability. And now you're getting the American technology that was of a super secret spy plane. And it's why the classification of F-35 is so stringently managed. And it's why the building of facilities in Belgium, in Denmark, in the Netherlands that have to be approved by the United States, I would say State Department, that's not right, but the US government has to certify them, because we now have technologies where we cannot afford the Chinese or the Russians to hack into. Because if they hack into what an F-35 can do, they have gained the 15 years of technological advantage that will never get back. And so the promise was, you get to buy into this platform, you get to shape what you want in the user groups to ask what the capabilities are, if they're uniquely Norwegian or uniquely Dutch threat or uniquely British threat. But nobody gets source code. You don't get to re-engineer the mission computer software in an F-35. Because if you're Canadian or if you're Belgian, you don't have the cyber protection that a super secret spy plane has to manage. So you years ago, you got to make the trade-off. I get to be in the most super secret fighter of all time, but I don't get to threaten the entire enterprise by my poorly integrated, non-existent cyber. And the worst country in the world is Canada. Can't even spell cyber, let alone have an IT system that can be protected. Okay, there's the compromise. Okay. But you get first time in history, super secret, like this is special access program level, not some NATO top secret, way up there. And now you get emitters that can see like you never knew existed ever before. That's the key part of it. So there's no kill switch. You don't get source code because you can't manage it if you're Canadian, Belgian, Dutch in the systems you had before. You have to build everything to the specifications of what we were never used to previously, but now are learning along the way, because you protect it so the Chinese and Russians can never gain the 15 years of technological advantage we have. Is it hard to maintain? It's harder to maintain than ever before. Are the numbers of how much it costs per hour to maintain the same for everyone? It isn't, and it is as much because if I'm the biggest Air Force in the world, the United States Air Force, I have so many humans that I can put in my technicians or my ground crew to work on airplanes. It is manpower excessive. If I come from Canada or Belgium, I have really specialized, really talented men and women that fix my airplanes. They're engine specialists, they're avionics specialists, they're airframe specialists. And I have a fraction of the manpower that goes to fixing the airplane. So my cost per hour per airplane is not the same metric as what we see out of the United States General Accounting Office, the GAO, which publishes those numbers. Reliability and serviceability. Look, the Israeli Defense Force in combat operations had availability rates way above 80%. That's nothing near the 50% that you see the media publish. Okay, so it's going to cost more per hour to maintain. Absolutely no doubt about that. Do we share spares back and forth? The philosophy all along was, if you're Finland, if you're Norway, you don't have to buy all the spare tires, all the spare radar parts, all the spare helmets, all the ejection seats that you did in previous generations, that we would have a global sparing like DHL, FedEx, UPS, and share parts back and forth from central hubs. That was the philosophy intended to lower the spares, reliability, and all the warehouses that we needed. That's the philosophy. And that's why this mentality of, oh, I don't have my spares in Canada and I don't have my spare parts in Belgium, because we were just going to move them back and forth with DHL overnight, whatever you needed. In the end, will that work? Certainly not like people expected. And I think air forces are going to learn to do like Switzerland does. Oh, by the way, Finland does it. It's called security of supply. The Swiss never believed that they would get their F-18 parts, from now the Boeing company. And so they bought all the things that they needed ahead of time to support their operations. And I think you will see it migrate back more to that. But that's really the conversation about spares. So no kill switch. You don't get source code because you can't manage it, but you get the most secret airplane of all time. And the philosophy of sparing was, we're going to share it amongst all of us because we all fly the same airplane. People talk about their availability rates not being acceptable now. And I think that has proven that logic doesn't succeed all the time.
Just to be crystal clear, with a no source code, it makes sense. What about mission planning? Because I've read stuff in the French news.
Mission data files in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. So that is what's called the panhandle of Florida. It's the western edge of Florida. Eglin Air Force Base is a Canadian, UK, Australian programming lab there. So the mission data files, that's everything that electronic warfare looks at, right? In whatever theater in the world, whether in Asia Pacific for Australia, we're in Central Europe for the UK, we're in Canada in the far north, or even collectively in the Middle East. Those three nations program all the emitter data for their airplanes in their lab. Not American. You may draw from American sources, but those nations are programming on their own. And that's to go up against people that say, oh, no, it's all American. No, you program your own. You certainly want to leverage the intelligence that comes from the partner nations and everything that we've collectively gathered. If you're Sweden, you don't have a lot of intelligence gathering around the world like all the nations that contribute to F-35. So it's leveraging partnership.
Just to make sure I fully understand, like if you take the Rafale, with the Rafale, you're going to have all the electronic warfare suite, the spectra that is usually not shared with your clients. Then you're going to be doing for every single flight a mission preparation, where it's going to be put in a computer that usually sits in the squadron. Then you're going to get some sort of disk that you're going to plug in the aircraft. It's something we can do on the boat. We don't have to connect to the outside world. Is it possible with the F-35 to do that without going back and forth with the US? Because what I've read is basically if you cannot do your mission planning and your data has to go in the US, you're done, which didn't make sense to me.
If you're in a Dutch squadron, your vault where you are doing all your mission planning and all your loading, that's all done unique to you. You're not asking America for permission to go fly a Tuesday mission in the Netherlands.
So we have fake news in the press. That's okay. So yeah, okay. So yeah, you can use your stuff. You can be on your boat, do your stuff on your boat. But if you want to upgrade, if you want to learn from an F-35 that got radar scanning or detected some stuff in Asia, and you want to be able to put it in your libraries, and everything is going to be done in Eglin. Is that correct?
No, well, only for those three nations.
Okay, yeah. For those tiers one partners. Okay, yeah.
If I'm the Australians, I want to leverage what the American forces know about the
Middle East.
East.
Yeah, it's a 3 eyes.
None of us want to go back to the Middle East to another war, but if we did, I want what their information has, and that's what the partnership had promised all along. So yes, in a sense, there is this reliance to the American sources, but it isn't the mother may I is the term, or the permission to fly every single day. Absolutely not. Look, we're all very anti-American right now, courtesy of Donald Trump in his second term and his amazing antagonism to virtually everyone around the world. So there's very much an anti-US sentiment. It certainly is very strong in Canada. He's managed to insult 41 million Canadians, and they're appropriately upset and angered, first time in
a long time,
generations. They're like that, and we're the same around the world, right? So it's a very anti-American.
Just as a quick reminder, if I'm correct, Canada burned the White House a long time ago.
1812. Canada burned down the White House. That's right. The last time there was a war.
They don't talk about it enough, but yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and many Canadians still remember that. But yeah, as far as that would go today, not very far. And Canada is unique, right? We have an unprotected border with the United States, and the North American Aerospace Defense Command protects the continent, not just the Arctic, the Pacific, Atlantic Oceans, the southern borders. The continent is protected from all threats as a command that has been together for well over 60 years. My father, who was a fighter pilot, flew air defense. I flew the same missions in the CF-18, the beginning and the end of my military career, in NORAD together. We have a very close partnership protecting the continent. All of the relationships are strained right now, not at the military level, but every one of us citizens in every country is on edge now because of this administration a year and a bit into this term of 4 years. I'll tell you, it's 8 months till midterm elections, potentially some change of some element of power. But we're all anxious, and everything is anti-Trump right now. And so it reflects on especially the antagonism of weapon systems, and something so highlighted like F-35, right? It's in so many NATO nations now fly F-35 or are procuring F-35 that it gets attention of everybody in their own countries and all the countries around. What is the threat by Donald Trump? And is there really going to be a NATO ally from the US, which is the biggest military power in the Western world? And we rightfully need to question that. We don't question the officers, that the men and women we worked with for so many years. You did it in the Navy, so you understand the close link to the United States Navy and what they're capable of and the exchanges that go back and forth. I knew it because I flew on exchange with the United States Air Force for 5 years. I was trained as a test pilot by the United States Navy. We understand these relationships. And NATO, all of us flew with American forces in all our exercises at the tactical leadership program. And so many of us have spent time with those back and forth. But right now it's on edge, and it paints every conversation about what the future is and where is America, and what an airplane like the F-35 that is so American centric, that is it really going to be, are we going to be on our own, or is it going to function like we thought it would over so many years? So it's an issue, and it's not going away. Every week is chaos with this president.
You flew a lot above Canada. What about switching your twin-engine F-18 for a single-engine aircraft?
It really was a big part of the discussion of new fighter. It was in the conversation every day. You needed two engines, which was not the criteria when the the F-18 was picked originally, but it became a thought. And I would counter by using the F-16 squadrons at Fairbanks, Alaska, at Eielson Air Force Base, that flew F-16s for more than 30 years in Alaska, right? As forbidding as any place in the world, many respects further north than Canadians regularly operated, flew in Alaska for more than 30 years and never had an engine related aircraft loss, period.
Great technicians. So
it speaks a lot to the advancement of later generation fourth gen engines, and then we look at F-35, which is as much a commercial engine design as the older engines that we're used to. And so the engine reliability issue, it really went away in Canada when the Super Hornet was disqualified because the United States Navy refused to share classified information to the Canadian selection team, and they were kicked out of the program. And then the conversation of two engines went away. Okay. Look, we have bigger threats over history flying in the north to worry about than what a single engine problem. Our issues are spatial disorientation. Our engines are fuel. Our issues are fuel and the tyranny of distance, the enormous ranges we have to cover, the distances we have to cover, and how far our alternate airfields are, which are hundreds of kilometers away. It's just a question of fuel and how far we go. If you eject anywhere in Canada, it doesn't have to be the Arctic. Go north for 100 kilometers in Canada at any time of the year, and there's no civilization. There's no guarantee someone's going to find you. The Arctic is colder, but it's no less remote than the vast parts of all of Canada. So it became a highlighted point until the Boeing Super Hornet was kicked out of the competition, and then that conversation went away.
That's nice. I love to keep you for hours, but we're on a Sunday evening, so I'm gonna have to wrap it up. I like to say, when I used to share about the F-35, my 2 cents, I would explain to the French viewers that my personal opinion on the F-35 is that it's like a teenager that hasn't matured yet. So when you're a teenager, you don't look your best. It's not a young, efficient 25-year-old male or female right now. What's your take on it? When do you think we're gonna start getting the versions where everybody's going? A bit like the Rafale right now. Like, as you said, the Rafale started prototype 86. Ask anyone about the Rafale in the early 2000s. It wasn't a great plane back in those days. Then we had the F3, and with the F3 became omnirole. I was lucky to be picked to fly its F3 4, and that was truly an omnirole aircraft. But before that, Superintendant was leasing, was doing all the stuff, and we kind of forgot that when we look at the F-35 right now. For me, he's still there. What's your take? What age would you give him?
Yeah, and look at the examples. So Eurofighter Typhoon, single roll air-to-air airplane in the beginning, and Cold War stunted it. The F-18 was haunted in the beginning. It didn't have enough range. It was horrible at what it did and had a horrible accident rate. The F-16, the engine reliability was so poor. It was not a very sophisticated airplane. No one liked it. F-15 was like that. A C-17 transport sat on the ground when it was first deployed and basically never flew. The C-130J Hercules was a a program disaster that cost Lockheed $1 billion of its own money till finally sorted out. And these aircraft ultimately matured, and we can't imagine flying without them. And F-35 will come into its own. I think you're getting close to it. I credit the Dutch Air Force, the Royal Netherlands Air Force, as being really the lead in Central Europe and how to use a fifth-generation platform, how to integrate with NATO forces. But now, look, the Belgians are training on the Danes have their airplanes, albeit some of them deployed to Greenland because of Trump. The Norwegians are very mature with the product. The Finns are training on their jets now. And pretty soon, so many more nations will have them. Italy, mature with the F-35 now, knows how to integrate with their Typhoons. I think you're a couple of years away from so many nations having it that they're past the growing pains, that they figured out the spare parts of how to manage those, and the reliability will be like it expects to be. Everyone will know how to use it. They won't just be learning the airplane and be novices. They'll be mature with it, like the Dutch are, or like the Royal Australian Air Force is. I think the best example for me is the Royal Australian Air Force. One of the first countries to get it. Their threat is China. They had to match it with the Super Hornets and the Growler capability and the very unique distances that Australia has to find. And now they have an astonishing capability of wedge tail, their version of airborne early warning, how to integrate with the rest of the forces. Now they're looking at drones and how to fly with their version of what will be a drone and integrate all of that with their forces. And you see the maturity of the airplane. So I think you're right. It's a teenager, F-35. When everybody give it 2 more years and everyone's used it, and then you're going to start to see it come into its own. The growing pains are the same of every airplane in history. We just didn't pay attention before. It didn't matter to us before. Look, Rafale was 10 years ahead of anything else out there. When I sat in it in 1987, the center holographic display, all of it, and the eloquence of that design, which is so different than Eurofighter, which is brute, ugly Brit design with 1 million switches that make no sense. It was an elegance to it. But then the Cold War happened, the end of the Cold War happened, and it stalled for so many years before it gained time and then eventually matured to the product it is now. I think the big steps in technology always stumble like that. The teenager analogy works really good for F-35, even this many years after it started. It's now in the hands of a younger generation that know how to use it, and now they're really employing it. I'll finish by giving one last analogy. When the F-22 showed up in the operational squadrons, it wasn't very effective. The squadrons were populated by F-15 pilots who'd been great in the F-15.
Using it as an F-15. I've seen that in Rafale squadrons. Oh, yeah.
They were going to fly a better F-15, and they had thrust vectoring, and they could fly to 70 degrees angle of attack. And so here they were in dogfights, immediately using thrust vectoring and sitting around at 70 degrees angle of attack, getting shot down. And it wasn't until the younger, the pilots that grew up in F-22, became weapons instructors, became senior flight leads, that they understood that they had a stealth platform that had very unique aerodynamic capabilities about how fast they could go, but how to use it the way it was intended. It took the generation to grow up into that. So when we see, as we're starting now to see, pilots that grew up in F-35 that now become weapons instructors and senior leaders in the Air Forces, now you start to see it being used like it's supposed to. So teenager, that's a fair analogy for F-35.
And the example you just gave is something that I've witnessed switching from Super-Étendard to Rafale when we transition. And we've put all the very experienced pilots initially on the Rafale, and it just, it's exactly how you describe it. I think it's just like a transformation. Transformation is the same for everyone. Just a quick question. You talk about the screens, the buttons on the Typhoon. The F-35 has this huge screen. Do you think it's the best design, or do you think sometimes, because I know some screen and some touch stuffs, I remember having flights like this, trying to push some buttons on the Rafale. Is it the best design, you think, or the next
it's
generation?
A 20-year-old design. That's, early 2000s. So we're 20 plus years into it. And what you see in Block 4 is a different presentation of screens. Remember, it's two screens, not one big, large area display like F-15EX as an example. But that's redundancy. That was, if one failed, you'd still have another. That's said. No, I think the screen, how it's all used evolves over time. We've learned as time has moved on. I always thought it was very effective. Touch screens different than in other platforms, different than your iPhone, but it all evolves and yeah, there's no perfect answer to that.
It's a question I got asked to ask. That's why I've got some followers who are very, very technical. Last point, just my take on the F-35 and the new generation is their weakest part of the life cycle is on the ground. And now we truly have in the West to understand that we need to protect our very unique piece of equipment on the ground because they've been designed to survive in the air. But underground, they're not designed to survive is they don't have the proper shelter, all that stuff. Is it something you think apply as well to the F-35, or do you sleep without any issue knowing how our bases protect the F-35, Rafale, all that stuff?
Oh, no, come on. Let's talk about how we had bases in Central Europe and we all had hardened aircraft shelters in all our bases, right? My father flew in Baden-Solingen in F-86s, late 50s era. And then we built these hardened aircraft shelters. They were all over France. They were all over Central Europe. Used to be. And then, by the way, we went away from it because we were never going to have a big war again. There were never going to be a near-peer threat for us. And now I want hardened aircraft shelters, just like we always had. I truly believe we are back where we were before, to single shelters of all the cement that it was, and depending what country, however you protected them, I think we're back to that.
It's just like fashion cycles, just like fashion.
Absolutely. Some of those fashions you never want to come back, but in the case of hardened aircraft shelters, I think we have to understand it. We do understand dispersed runway operations, like the Swedes and the Finns have protected. They've done so well, right? In Finland, they exercise it, always have throughout the F-18 era. The Swedes now more than ever with a Gripen, but they always had theirs. Look, in Central Europe, we had runways. We just never exercised them, but we had them in Germany on the Autobahns. The Russians had them in the former East Germany. Highway runways off from the main runways. I think we're back to planning for dispersed runway operations because we're into a near-peer threat.
We're training last 2 weeks ago. We had a big exercise in France, Mont-de-Marsan. They had to fly off 20 Rafale, and then they had to load 8 Scout missiles and did a strike using those 8 Scout missiles. So we're getting back up to speed on those. My final question would be, if 5th gen is sensor fusion and C2 node, what is going to be the 6th, and when do you expect the 6th generation to show up?
6th gen is F-47, it is FCAS, it is GCAP, or I call it Tempest still, whatever the Brit partnership is. It's the UK, Japan, and Italy right now. FCAS is imploding between the fight between the French and German major players. Spain is a sub-player in that, but it's really French and Germans fighting over work share. The future is a platform that goes faster, has more capability, has better sensors, but it's a system of systems. It is. I think of it as the mothership. I think of myself in a platform managing a collaborative combat aircraft, one of them with me, many of them with me. They are intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance platforms. They are jammers, electronic attack platforms. They are bomb trucks, meaning they're carrying bombs with me, or they're archers, meaning they're carrying missiles with me. And they're with me, and I don't know if it's one with me or 5 with me, and are they ahead of me? Are they behind me? What they give me is combat mass, so more combat capability. They are some fraction less expensive than me. They're $20 million, but they're not $120 million. I can afford to lose them. They're attritable. I can't throw them away, but I'm not going to sacrifice a human. I can use them in higher risk missions. Like maybe I send them and probe into an environment where if they get detected and shot down, I can risk that instead of putting you and I out there to die. I don't know, do they mirror us as we fly along, or do they fly their AI controlled platform? How do I trust AI? What's the governance and the margins of AI? There's so many elements to be developed, but that's what I expect 6th Gen to do. And I actually, we're going to see it in F-35 soon, managing fighter-sized, supersonic, stealth drones, collaborative combat aircraft.
That's why I'm gonna ask you the question, because you have experience in test and everything. Why can't we use an F-16? Why can't we use a Rafale, a Typhoon, or an F-18 to be that manager? I see it like as a manager of those systems. Why do we need to invest in a new platform? Is it to keep the engineer and the technology going because we know the competition is going to do it? Or how can we explain to the taxpayers that an F-16 with some extra computers cannot do the same job because you won't be taking the risk, or less risk, you're going to send the drones?
For that mothership, right? So why don't I just take an F-15 and put someone in the back seat to manage it, which they may actually do that in F-15AX. But then we're not leveraging the technology that we developed over 30 years. Every 6th Gen platform is a VLO platform. So while the public and the social media experts want to argue if stealth is not, or is not, guess what the FCAS looks like? Guess what GCAP looks like? Guess what F-47 renderings, because we haven't seen a picture, probably looks like. Very stealthy. You have to leverage where technology has gone. We're smarter about how the materials we use. We're smarter about the maneuverability. We're more efficient. The engines we're going to put inside are more efficient than ever before. More powerful, more efficient, which means they allow our platforms to go further, stay in the air longer. All of those have to come in a platform. And then I have to have the computing power to manage other airplanes with me. And oh, by the way, I have to have the sophistication of making my displays so simple that the next generation of sensor fusion will not drive the cognitive overload that you and I talked about, and the need for that 5GCX.ai skill set that we're teaching. So I have to do that. I can't just take an old platform. But let's finish by realizing that the Chinese have turned their version of MiG-17s and MiG-19s, their J5 and J6 platforms, into they're really suicidal drone. They will be launched against Taiwan with the manned fighters. And maybe it's the drones first to soak up all the missiles, or maybe with the manned fighters, they're sending combat mass of retrofitted manned airplanes towards Taiwan, and that will give the West, whoever ends up in that conflict, a massive problem of numbers, because you're not going to be able to know, is it a J5, is it a J7, is it a J20, is it a J35? You're going to have a huge quantity problem to solve, not just the quality of the fighter. So could you take all the F-16s that were used by the European nations and turn them into automated suicidal drones? Sure. Should you invest in the future as the mothership in an old platform? No, I think you have to go pay for FCAS, for GCAP, and create the mothership that is a combat survivable, capable fighter, but manages the future, which we all believe is collaborative combat aircraft.
Perfect. Very clear. As a closing word, what is, from your point of view, the most persistent misconception about the F-35 that we can read about and that you would like to debunk? Is there like something you've been reading about the F-35? I mean, we talked about stealth, but something people truly do not understand about what this aircraft brings to the fighter pilots, to the battlefield.
I have tried for 20 years in consumable plain English to explain what fifth generation capabilities are. And in 30 years of fifth gen, I'm one of only 3 Canadians that has ever flown a fifth gen platform. And to every fighter pilot who has flown with or died against a stealth platform, they are all believers, right? Everyone's Air Force. But to the public, it's hard to understand, what does it mean? And I always come back to the men and women that fly and the term of survivability. Because our responsibility is to make sure that when we send them into combat, into harm's way, our responsibility is to make sure they come back every single time. And the F-35 does that. That's the highlight that I, as a Canadian, have always remembered what was important. My job is to, as when I commanded in combat, my greatest success is I brought everybody home at the end of combat. Our responsibility is to put them in platforms that will keep them alive, allow them to do their mission. That's why we buy F-35. That's why we listen to all the noise from the media, from all the haters. We argue with the politicians and explain as best we can, because we want our men and women to come home, our sons and our daughters to come home every time.
Makes sense. Great closing elements. Thank you very much. Thanks for spending the time with us. I hope all the French audience and French Canadian audience enjoyed. Thank you for your service. Very American to say, but I don't really know how to say it in French. On dit pas trop. Encore merci. Merci pour votre temps. Et I hope the winter is not going to be too bad in Canada. I'm in Spain right now. So.
On a skié ce matin. Il faisait moins 20 dehors. C'est un vrai.
D'accord.
Ici, 400 centimètres de neige déjà. On est juste au commencement de février. Fait que l'hiver n'est pas fini, mais c'est un vrai hiver ici, assez froid dehors. Et merci beaucoup.
Merci à vous. Merci beaucoup. Merci.